The Dark Scrolls. The story of Princess Diana is so often cast in the warm light of modern fairy tales. The shy young kindergarten teacher swept into the dazzling yet dangerous embrace of Britain's monarchy, adored across the globe, and mourned as the people's princess after her tragic death. Yet beneath the glamour, beneath the romance, beneath the heartbreak, lies a far older tale, one not written in newspapers or glossy magazines, but etched into the tangled roots of English history. It is a tale that stretches back across 5 centuries to the violent, shadowed world of the Tudor dynasty, and to a secret that, if true, places Diana Spencer at the center of one of the most startling genealogical mysteries in royal history. To understand this hidden inheritance, we must begin not with Diana herself, but with the Tudors, that tempestuous family who ruled England in the 16th century, with brilliance, bloodshed, and scandal in equal measure. Their reign gave us Henry VIII and his 6 wives, the shattering break with Rome, the fiery martyrdoms of Protestants under Mary I, and the glittering age of Elizabeth I. Yet it also left behind questions of legitimacy, whispered rumors of bastards, and contested bloodlines that historians still debate. Among these mysteries, 2 figures stand out as particularly relevant to our journey. Henry Fitzroy, the acknowledged illegitimate son of Henry VIII, and Catherine Carey, the daughter of Mary Boleyn, whose paternity has long been the subject of tantalizing speculation. But why, one might ask, should these shadowy Tudors concern Diana, born Diana Frances Spencer in 1961, centuries after the dynasty's fall? The answer lies in the delicate lattice of aristocratic marriages that wove together the nobility of England generation after generation. For the Spencers were not merely wealthy landowners or socialites. They were, for centuries, close allies of the crown, their blood mingling with that of kings and queens. Over time, the Spencer family became custodians of hidden royal connections, heirs not only to estates and titles, but perhaps to the secrets of the Tudors themselves. Thus, when Diana married Charles, Prince of Wales, in 1981, the world celebrated a fairy tale. Yet, behind the veil, genealogists whispered another story, that this marriage was the culmination of centuries of careful lineage preservation, a return of Tudor blood, long obscured, often denied, to the British throne through Diana's sons, William and Harry. The first piece of this hidden puzzle rests with Henry Fitzroy. Born in 1519 to Elizabeth Blount, a lady-in-waiting, Fitzroy was the only illegitimate child Henry VIII ever publicly acknowledged. He was showered with titles, the Duke of Richmond and Somerset, and raised as if he might one day become king himself. Yet Fitzroy's life was short. He died at just 17, childless, leaving historians to wonder what might have been. While he left no direct descendants, his very existence signaled that Henry VIII was not above planting royal seeds outside of marriage. If the king acknowledged one bastard, could there have been others left unacknowledged, whose blood continued down through the centuries, mingling quietly into families like the Spencers? Some researchers believe so, pointing to the fertile ground of rumor and courtly intrigue in Henry's reign. The second and far more tantalizing thread comes through Catherine Carey. She was the daughter of Mary Boleyn, sister of Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's ill-fated second queen. Mary Boleyn was, before her sister, the king's mistress, and it has long been suggested, though never conclusively proven, that her children, Catherine and Henry Carey, were fathered not by her husband William Carey, but by Henry VIII himself. If true, this would make Catherine Carey a half-sister to Elizabeth I and a hidden daughter of Henry VIII. It would also make her descendants heirs, in a shadowy sense, to the Tudor line. Catherine Carey married into nobility, her children and grandchildren intermarrying with some of England's most prominent families. Over generations, these bloodlines merged with the Spencer lineage. By the 19th and 20th centuries, the Spencers could claim descent not only from established aristocrats, but, if the Catherine Carey theory holds, from the Tudors themselves. In this way, Diana, a daughter of the Spencers, carried within her veins a secret legacy, a whisper of Tudor blood long thought extinguished. Part 1 of this exploration seeks to illuminate the context in which such a hidden lineage could have survived. To do so, we must first understand the volatile nature of Tudor legitimacy, the obsession with succession that haunted Henry VIII, and the ways in which aristocratic families quietly preserved their connections to power. For it is in this environment that myths and truths alike were born, and it is from these shadows that Diana's supposed Tudor inheritance emerges. Let us step back, then, into the court of Henry VIII, a place of opulence and terror, where queens could be crowned one day and executed the next, and where the king's desires reshaped not only marriages, but the very fate of the realm. Henry's desperate hunger for a male heir drove him to marry 6 times, to break with Rome, and to plunge his country into decades of religious turmoil. Yet, even as he strained to secure the succession through legitimate offspring, his mistresses and bastards haunted the margins of his reign. Elizabeth Blount, the mother of Fitzroy, was but one of several women said to have borne his children. Mary Boleyn was another, her liaisons with the king whispered about even in her own time. To acknowledge Fitzroy was one thing. To acknowledge Mary Boleyn's children would have been far more dangerous, for it would have undermined the legitimacy of Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn and, by extension, of Elizabeth I. Thus, the rumors surrounding Catherine Carey were never officially recognized, but they persisted nonetheless, passed down in the margins of history. The possibility that Catherine was Henry's daughter has fascinated historians for centuries. Alison Weir, in her work on Britain's royal families, notes the striking resemblance between Catherine and portraits of Henry VIII. David Starkey, though more cautious, acknowledges the plausibility of the claim given Mary Boleyn's known intimacy with the king. The Oxford Dictionary of National Biography maintains the ambiguity, recording William Carey as Catherine's father, while acknowledging the persistent rumors. It is in this uncertain space between fact and speculation that genealogical mysteries take root, allowing families like the Spencers to quietly inherit what official history denied. For the Spencer family, such hidden ties mattered immensely. As one of England's great aristocratic houses, they traced their origins to the late medieval gentry, rising through shrewd marriages and royal favor. By the 17th century, they had secured earldoms and vast estates, their influence cemented at Althorpe, the family seat. Generation after generation, the Spencers married into prominent families, consolidating wealth and power. If within those unions lay a fragment of Tudor blood, it would not have been spoken aloud, yet it would have been treasured all the same, a secret thread woven into the fabric of lineage. When Diana was born in 1961, few could have guessed that she would one day embody this convergence of past and present. To the public, she was an aristocrat, but not of royal blood, a fresh outsider who would marry into the House of Windsor and inject new vitality into the monarchy. Yet genealogists knew otherwise. The Spencers were not outsiders at all. They had always been close to the crown, and through the rumored paternity of Catherine Carey, they may have carried with them a sliver of Tudor inheritance. In Diana, that inheritance flowered anew, though few outside the rarefied circles of genealogical research understood its implications. It is a remarkable thought that when Diana walked down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral in 1981, the veil upon her face concealed not only a nervous young bride, but centuries of hidden history. The millions watching on television saw the union of Windsor and Spencer as a fairy tale, But in the bloodlines flowing through her veins, another story was being told, one written in Tudor ink, stained with the passions and betrayals of a long-dead dynasty. Her marriage to Charles, therefore, can be seen not merely as a personal romance, but as the symbolic return of Tudor blood to the throne of England, a restoration of a forgotten chapter, whether by design or by the invisible hand of ancestry. Yet, before we embrace this conclusion, we must weigh the evidence carefully. Genealogy is a field fraught with conjecture, where rumor and record intertwine. The claim that Catherine Carey was Henry VIII's daughter remains unproven, but it is precisely this ambiguity that lends the story its allure, for in history's shadows lie the secrets that capture our imagination. Was Diana's bloodline truly Tudor, or is this a tale spun from coincidence and wishful thinking? To answer, we must trace the lineage step by step, following the threads from Mary Boleyn's courtship to Diana's tragic destiny. This is where our journey begins, in the Tudor court, with Henry VIII's restless pursuit of heirs and his entanglement with the Boleyn sisters. In the next part of this exploration, we will look more closely at Mary Boleyn, her relationship with the king, and the birth of Catherine Carey, a figure whose disputed parentage forms the cornerstone of Diana's supposed Tudor legacy. For within Catherine's story lies the heart of this mystery, the blurred line between mistress and queen, between bastard and heir, between forgotten daughter and royal progenitor. And it is upon this line that the fate of modern monarchy may precariously balance. The whispers of the past beckon us further, inviting us to peer into archives and portraits, to listen to the echoes of courtly gossip, to untangle the web of marriages and alliances. As we proceed, we must remember that history is not only a record of facts, but also of possibilities, and it is in those possibilities that we glimpse the hidden secrets of royal blood. The story of Princess Diana's Tudor ancestry is not a simple one. It is a labyrinth, a tapestry woven with threads both bright and dark. To walk its corridors is to feel the breath of forgotten monarchs, to sense the weight of crowns long buried, to hear the faint pulse of Tudor hearts within the living blood of modern princes. Part 2 will lead us deeper into this labyrinth, where the figure of Mary Boleyn waits at its entrance, and where the truth of Catherine Carey's birth may yet reveal itself. The great mystery of Princess Diana's Tudor connection begins in earnest with a woman whose name still conjures whispers in the corridors of history, Mary Boleyn. To some, she is merely a footnote to the more infamous story of her sister Anne, the doomed queen who lost her head on the scaffold. Yet Mary's tale, though less dramatic, may have planted the seeds of a secret legacy that echoed across centuries. It is through her beauty, her scandal, her liaisons, that the possible Tudor bloodline flowed, and it is in the disputed paternity of her daughter, Catherine Carey, that the entire story of Diana's hidden ancestry pivots. Mary Boleyn was born into ambition. The Boleyn family, though not among the oldest of England's nobility, had risen through shrewd marriages and royal service. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, was a skilled courtier and diplomat, eager to press his family into the heart of power. Mary and her siblings, Anne and George, were raised to shine in courtly circles. Trained in languages, manners, and the arts of charm, they were positioned as pawns in the high-stakes game of Tudor politics. As a young woman, Mary's beauty and vivacity quickly attracted attention. She was sent to the French court as part of Mary Tudor's entourage when Henry VIII's sister married King Louis XII. There she acquired not only refinement but a reputation for looseness. Rumors spread that she became the mistress of King Francis I, who later disparaged her with cruel nicknames. Whether true or exaggerated, these whispers followed her back to England, where she soon found herself entangled in another, far more consequential liaison, with Henry VIII himself. The details of Mary's affair with the king remain cloaked in shadow. We do not know precisely when it began or how long it lasted, but contemporary accounts confirm that she was indeed Henry's mistress, and perhaps for several years. During this period, she married William Carey, a gentleman of the king's household, in what seemed a respectable match. Yet it was common at the Tudor court for mistresses to be married off to pliant husbands, ensuring discretion while maintaining access to the king. Thus, Mary could simultaneously play the role of loyal wife and secret consort. It was in this tangled context that Catherine Carey was born in 1524. Officially, she was the daughter of William Carey, but from the very beginning there were whispers that her true father was none other than Henry VIII. Those whispers grew louder when, just 2 years later, Mary gave birth to a son, Henry Carey, also rumored to be the king's child. If true, Catherine and Henry Carey were half-siblings to Elizabeth I, born of the same father but denied royal recognition. They would have carried within them the fiery Tudor bloodline, hidden beneath a facade of legitimacy. Why then would Henry VIII not acknowledge them as he had Henry Fitzroy? The answer lies in politics. To recognize the Careys would have meant admitting to an affair with Mary Boleyn while he pursued her sister Anne as a potential queen. Such an admission would have been disastrous, for it would have tainted his marriage to Anne with the stain of incest under canon law. By acknowledging Fitzroy, the son of an unmarried mistress, Henry risked little, but to acknowledge children by Mary Boleyn would have imperiled his future marriage, and thus the succession itself. Silence was the safer path. Nevertheless, rumors persisted. Portraits of Catherine Carey show a striking resemblance to the Tudor line, her round face, auburn hair, and sharp features echoing those of Henry VIII. Alison Weir, in her genealogical studies, has argued that the case for Catherine's Tudor paternity is compelling, though circumstantial. David Starkey is more cautious, pointing out that resemblance alone cannot prove blood. The Oxford Dictionary of National Biography notes the speculation, but maintains William Carey as the recorded father. Yet even among cautious scholars, the idea has never been dismissed. The possibility remains alive, a tantalizing gap in the historical record. Catherine Carey's life itself offers subtle hints of her elevated status. Despite her father's relatively modest rank, she rose quickly in court, becoming a favored lady-in-waiting to Elizabeth I. Her close relationship with the Queen suggests a bond deeper than mere service, perhaps the intimacy of half-sisters. Elizabeth was famously cautious in her affections, yet she showed consistent favor to Catherine and her children. Was this kindness born of kinship? Some historians believe so. As Catherine matured, she married Sir Francis Knollys, a courtier of impeccable reputation. Together they had at least 14 children, a brood that spread across England's nobility. Through their descendants, Catherine's possible Tudor blood seeped quietly into countless aristocratic lines. Her children married into families of influence, carrying with them a legacy whispered but never proclaimed. Among these unions, one path leads directly to the Spencer family, and thus to Diana. In this way, Catherine Carey's uncertain parentage becomes the crucial hinge upon which Diana's Tudor inheritance swings. To appreciate the weight of this possibility, we must consider the nature of Tudor secrecy. The 16th century was an age when legitimacy was everything. A king's heir had to be unassailable, lest factions tear the realm apart. Henry VIII's desperation for a son demonstrates the peril of ambiguity. For him to admit Catherine and Henry Carey as his bastards would have created dynastic chaos. Yet, illegitimate or not, their bloodline endured. Over time, legitimacy mattered less than lineage, and aristocratic families prized any connection, however tenuous, to royal blood. The Spencers, ever ambitious, married strategically into circles that may have carried Catherine's heritage. By the 17th century, they had risen to earldoms. By the 18th, they were entrenched among the great houses of Britain. Their seat at Althorpe became a symbol of enduring aristocracy, their lineage polished with every advantageous union. In this web of ancestry, Catherine Carey's descendants mingled with the Spencers, entwining their fates. Thus, by the 20th century, Diana Frances Spencer inherited not just titles and wealth, but a shadowy claim to Tudor blood. When she married Charles, she did more than join the Windsor family. She revived a connection stretching back to Henry VIII's court. Her children, William and Harry, became living vessels of this hidden history, uniting the Windsor line with a secret Tudor past. But let us return for a moment to Mary Boleyn herself. Too often overshadowed by her sister, Mary emerges here as a pivotal figure. She was, in many ways, a survivor. Unlike Anne, she escaped the headsman's axe. Unlike George, she avoided the fatal intrigues of the court. Though disgraced at times and cast aside by the king, she lived long enough to see her children flourish. If Catherine and Henry Carey were indeed Henry VIII's children, Mary achieved something her sister never could. She gave the king what he most desired, healthy offspring, born of her body, thriving into adulthood. In this sense, Mary's legacy outstrips Anne's. For while Anne bore Elizabeth, the greatest of Tudor monarchs, Mary may have sown the seeds of a bloodline that endured far beyond the Tudors themselves. The question, then, is not merely historical, but symbolic. If Diana descended from Catherine Carey, she carried within her the resilience of Mary Boleyn, the woman who navigated scandal and survived. She embodied a legacy of women overshadowed yet vital, marginalized yet enduring. Diana's own life, with its mixture of adoration and betrayal, triumph and tragedy, echoes Mary's in uncanny ways. Both were drawn into the orbit of kings. Both paid a heavy price for that proximity. Both left behind children who would reshape the monarchy. As we sift through these connections, one cannot ignore the allure of mystery. Genealogical records can take us only so far. Parish registers, wills, and heraldic charts record the official story. Catherine Carey, daughter of William Carey. But in the silences, in the inconsistencies, in the portraits and the favors granted, another story whispers, a story of forbidden love and hidden heirs. It is in that whisper that Diana's Tudor secret lives. And so we return to the present, to the image of Diana walking down the aisle in 1981. To the world, she was a fresh-faced outsider, her lineage respectable but not royal. Yet if the whispers are true, her blood carried the spark of Henry VIII himself, flowing invisibly into the veins of her sons. William, now heir to the throne, may one day rule not only as a Windsor, but as a Tudor reborn. Harry, though distanced from the crown, carries the same legacy. The past is never truly gone. It lives on in the present, shaping destinies in ways unseen. Part 2 of our journey has explored the life of Mary Boleyn and the birth of Catherine Carey, the disputed daughter whose existence forms the cornerstone of Diana's Tudor inheritance. We have seen how secrecy, necessity, and politics obscured the truth, leaving behind a legacy, half recorded, half remembered. We have traced how Catherine's descendants spread into the nobility, intertwining eventually with the Spencers. And we have glimpsed how this hidden lineage may have found new life in Diana and her children. Yet many questions remain. What of Henry Fitzroy, the king's acknowledged bastard, whose brief life demonstrated Henry's willingness to recognize illegitimate heirs? What does his story tell us about the plausibility of Catherine Carey's paternity? And how did the Spencers, in particular, come to embody this hidden inheritance? These are the questions that will guide us into Part 3 as we continue to unravel the dark Tudor secret hidden in Princess Diana's bloodline. If Catherine Carey's disputed birth provides one thread in the tapestry of Princess Diana's Tudor secret, another runs through the life of a boy whose destiny might have changed the monarchy forever. Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Richmond and Somerset, the only illegitimate son Henry VIII ever publicly acknowledged. His brief existence, often overlooked by popular histories, reveals much about the king's desperate obsession with heirs, his ambivalent attitude toward bastardy, and the fragile tightrope of legitimacy that defined Tudor politics. Fitzroy's rise and fall illuminate the environment in which whispers about Catherine Carey thrived, and they provide a poignant counterpoint to the survival of her line through the centuries. Henry Fitzroy was born in June 1519, the son of Henry VIII and Elizabeth Blount, a lady-in-waiting at court. Unlike many of the king's rumored bastards, Fitzroy was recognized openly. At the age of 6, he was granted a ducal title, an extraordinary honor for a child outside the bounds of legitimacy. He became Duke of Richmond and Somerset, his upbringing lavish and princely. Courtiers speculated that Henry VIII, still frustrated by the lack of a legitimate male heir, might even consider Fitzroy as his successor. For a time, it seemed possible that an illegitimate son might wear the crown. Fitzroy's very existence is revealing. He proved that Henry VIII was not above acknowledging children born outside wedlock, provided they posed no political inconvenience. His mother, Elizabeth Blount, was not connected to dangerous factions at court. Her child's recognition cost the king little. By contrast, acknowledging Catherine Carey as his daughter would have been catastrophic. To do so would have drawn attention to his affair with Mary Boleyn, at the very moment he pursued her sister Anne as his future queen. It would have cast doubt upon the legitimacy of any offspring with Anne, since canon law considered relations with two sisters incestuous. Thus Fitzroy was raised in splendor, while Catherine and her brother Henry Carey were left in the shadows. Their bloodline, if royal, was to remain hidden. The contrast between Fitzroy and Catherine Carey underscores the precarious politics of Henry's court. Fitzroy's recognition did not save him, however, from the cruelties of fate. In 1536, at only 17 years of age, he fell gravely ill, likely of tuberculosis, and died. His passing extinguished the only acknowledged male line Henry had outside of wedlock. The king was devastated, though he never fully admitted it. Fitzroy's death forced him once more into the desperate quest for legitimate heirs, a quest that would claim the lives of queens and plunge the kingdom into upheaval. Yet while Fitzroy's line ended with him, the whispers of Catherine Carey endured. If she was indeed Henry's daughter, her legacy would outlast Fitzroy's by centuries, woven discreetly into the fabric of England's nobility. Her children survived, multiplied, and flourished, passing her potential Tudor bloodline down through the generations. The irony is profound. The acknowledged bastard left no descendants, while the unacknowledged, if rumor holds true, ensured that Tudor blood flowed invisibly into the veins of later dynasties. This irony is not lost when we turn to the story of the Spencers, the family through which Catherine's descendants eventually merged into Diana's heritage. To understand Diana's place in this lineage, we must explore the rise of the Spencers themselves, a family whose history is one of ambition, service, and strategic marriage, positioning them as both allies of monarchs and custodians of ancestral legacies. The Spencers trace their origins to the late medieval period, emerging from the landed gentry in Northamptonshire. By the 15th century, they had established themselves as prosperous sheep farmers, amassing wealth from England's booming wool trade. The family's early motto, Dieu défende le droit, God defend the right, reflected both their piety and their aspirations. With wealth came influence, and with influence the opportunity to ascend into nobility. By the 16th century, the Spencers had secured knighthoods and parliamentary seats, embedding themselves in the political fabric of Tudor England. Their real ascent, however, came later, during the Stuart and Hanoverian eras. By cultivating loyalty to the crown and arranging advantageous marriages, the Spencers rose to earldoms and eventually the dukedom of Marlborough. Their estates, particularly the magnificent seat at Althorpe, became symbols of aristocratic permanence. Althorpe's grand halls echoed with portraits of ancestors who had married cleverly, served wisely, and preserved their family's stature through centuries of change. But alongside this visible grandeur ran subtler ambitions. The Spencers, like many noble families, prided themselves on connections to royal blood, however faint or contested. To claim descent from a king or queen, even through illegitimacy, was to claim a place in the national story. Genealogical charts were drawn and redrawn, stretching back to Plantagenets, Tudors, and beyond. Within this culture, the whispered link to Catherine Carey, daughter of Mary Boleyn and perhaps of Henry VIII, was more than rumor. It was a badge of hidden honor, a secret woven into the family identity. By the time Diana was born in 1961, the Spencers had long since established themselves among Britain's great aristocratic dynasties. They had produced earls, dukes, and influential courtiers. They had played roles in parliament, in wars, in diplomacy. Yet their greatest legacy would come not through politics, but through marriage. For in Diana, the family's centuries-old quest for proximity to the crown achieved its ultimate fulfillment. She was no longer merely the daughter of an earl, nor merely a descendant of whispered Tudor blood. She was to become the Princess of Wales, the mother of a future king. And so the story arcs back to Henry Fitzroy. His brief life, his recognition, and premature death serve as a reminder of the precariousness of succession in Tudor times. Had he lived, he might have altered the course of English history, perhaps even wearing the crown. Instead, his line ended, and the dynasty turned toward daughters and disputed heirs. Catherine Carey, unacknowledged but resilient, became the vessel through which Tudor blood might flow into the future. Through her descendants, including the Spencers, her legacy endured. Diana, centuries later, embodied this inheritance, her very existence a testament to the survival of what had once been denied. The Spencers' embrace of this legacy was not merely genealogical, but cultural. They curated their identity as a family bound to monarchy, guardians of continuity in a nation where crowns toppled and dynasties faltered. Their pride in ancestry extended beyond wealth and title. It was about bloodlines, about proximity to the very heart of England's history. When Diana stepped into the global spotlight as Charles's bride, she carried with her not only the expectations of a modern princess, but the invisible weight of centuries. Her blood, if the rumors are true, carried the pulse of Henry VIII himself, transmitted through Mary Boleyn's hidden daughter, preserved by aristocratic marriages, and brought at last into the House of Windsor. To appreciate the magnitude of this possibility, consider the symbolism. Henry VIII, desperate for heirs, tore England from the Catholic Church, executed queens, and left a dynasty riddled with uncertainty. Yet the blood he may have seeded through Mary Boleyn lived on, silent and unacknowledged, until it surfaced centuries later in Diana. Through her sons, William and Harry, that bloodline now sits at the very edge of the throne, poised once more to shape the monarchy's future. In this sense, history has come full circle. The king who feared extinction may have unknowingly ensured survival through the very children he dared not name. As we reflect on Henry Fitzroy's short life and the Spencers' long rise, a pattern emerges. History is not only what is written in chronicles and proclamations, but also what is whispered in rumors, hidden in marriages, and preserved in the shadows. Fitzroy reminds us that acknowledged heirs can perish, while unacknowledged ones may endure. The Spencers remind us that families can carry hidden legacies across centuries, waiting for the moment when they resurface in the public eye. Together they form the backdrop against which Diana's story unfolds. Part 3 has carried us from the tragedy of Fitzroy to the triumph of the Spencers, linking the fragile politics of Tudor succession to the enduring ambition of aristocratic families. We have seen how a lost son and a rising dynasty converge in Diana, whose very bloodline symbolizes both the perils and the persistence of royal heritage. But the journey is not yet complete. To grasp the full scope of Diana's Tudor secret, we must next turn to the genealogical record itself. The painstaking charts, the alliances, the marriages that trace the path from Catherine Carey to Diana Spencer. In Part 4, we will follow this lineage step by step, illuminating the bridges across centuries that connect the Boleyns, the Careys, the Knollys, and ultimately the Spencers. It is in these connections that the secret takes tangible form, transforming whispers into a narrative that binds Tudor past to Windsor present. When we left our journey in Part 3, the story had moved from the fragile brilliance of Henry Fitzroy to the enduring ambition of the Spencer dynasty. One son was acknowledged but perished young. Another child, perhaps unacknowledged, Catherine Carey, quietly ensured the possibility of Tudor blood surviving across the centuries. To trace Diana's hidden inheritance, we must now follow the winding path of genealogy, the marriages and alliances that transformed a whispered rumor into an enduring legacy. Here lies the heart of the matter, the careful preservation of a bloodline that, if the speculation holds true, made Diana Spencer the vessel of a forgotten Tudor secret. Let us begin with Catherine Carey herself. Born in 1524, she lived in the shadow of her mother, Mary Boleyn, and the scandalous whispers that surrounded her paternity. Official records named her father as William Carey, a courtier of moderate rank, but rumor pointed insistently to Henry VIII. Whatever her true origins, Catherine rose to prominence in the Elizabethan court. She became a trusted lady-in-waiting to Elizabeth I, who favored her with unusual closeness. Historians have long noted the affection between the Queen and Catherine, an intimacy that may have been born of kinship. If Catherine was indeed Elizabeth's half-sister, then their bond was more than political convenience. It was blood calling to blood. Catherine married Sir Francis Knollys, a man of integrity and deep Protestant conviction. Together they had no fewer than 14 children, a vast brood whose marriages and descendants spread like branches across England's aristocracy. It is through this marriage that the rumored Tudor bloodline entered the veins of families that would dominate English politics for generations. The Knollys children became courtiers, soldiers, and statesmen. Among them was Lettice Knollys, a woman whose life would embody both scandal and survival, much like her grandmother Mary Boleyn. Lettice Knollys, Catherine's daughter, was a striking figure at Elizabeth's court. She became the wife of Walter Devereux, Earl of Essex, and later married the dashing Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, Elizabeth's favorite. This second marriage enraged the Queen, who felt betrayed by both her cousin and her beloved courtier. Lettice was banished from court, condemned to live in the shadows of Elizabeth's jealousy. Yet her children thrived, and her bloodline intertwined with noble houses. Through Lettice, Catherine Carey's descendants gained prominence and influence, ensuring the survival of their heritage. From the Knollys and the Devereux lines, the legacy of Catherine Carey passed through generations, weaving into the fabric of England's ruling elite. Marriages connected them to the Percivals, the Howards, the Cliffords, names heavy with history and prestige. Each union carried forward the possibility of Tudor descent, even if never spoken aloud. By the 17th century, the Carey-Knollys descendants had become an unremarked but enduring presence in aristocratic society, their hidden claim buried beneath layers of genealogy. It is here that the story begins to approach the Spencers. For the Spencer family, ever ambitious, sought marriages that reinforced their position among the nobility. By aligning themselves with families connected to the Careys and Knollys, they drew the thread of Catherine's legacy into their own lineage. Over time, the whispered secret of Tudor blood became enmeshed with Spencer pride. The Spencers' rise, as we saw earlier, was built on land and wool, but also on marriages into families of stature. Their alliances carried them upward through the peerage, from knights to earls, and finally to dukes. Along the way, their genealogical web intersected with that of the Careys. One crucial link came through the marriage of Catherine Carey's granddaughter into a line that would eventually intersect with the Spencers in later centuries. The precise steps are labyrinthine, the kind of genealogical puzzle that demands patient study of family charts. But the outcome is clear. The Spencer family's ancestral tree contains branches that stretch back to Catherine Carey. By the 18th century, the Spencers had cemented themselves among the great houses of Britain. They cultivated not only wealth, but a culture of heritage, carefully preserving family records, portraits, and connections. Althorpe, their ancestral home, became a repository of aristocratic memory, its galleries lined with ancestors whose marriages told stories of ambition and survival. Within this gallery of faces lay the invisible presence of the Boleyns, the Careys, the Knollys, a legacy unspoken but not erased. Consider the symbolism. The Boleyn family, once at the very center of Tudor drama, fell into ruin after Anne's execution. George Boleyn was beheaded. Anne's name was blackened. Yet Mary, the lesser sister, survived, and through her daughter Catherine she seeded a legacy that endured in secret. The Spencers, centuries later, inherited this endurance. Their wealth gave them prominence, but their blood gave them proximity to monarchy. Diana, born into this lineage, embodied the culmination of both. She was the descendant of survivors, of Mary Boleyn, of Catherine Carey, of Lettice Knollys, women who navigated disgrace and exile, yet preserved their families' futures. To grasp the significance of this genealogy, one must see how it shaped perceptions of Diana herself. When she married Prince Charles, the world celebrated an ordinary young woman, elevated to princess. But genealogists knew she was anything but ordinary. Her ancestry linked her not only to the Spencers' grandeur, but to the very heart of Tudor intrigue. Through Catherine Carey, she may have carried the blood of Henry VIII himself. Her sons, William and Harry, thus became heirs not only of Windsor, but of a hidden Tudor inheritance. Let us pause to imagine this. Henry VIII, consumed by his obsession with heirs, executed wives, broke from Rome, and upended his kingdom in pursuit of a son. His legitimate male line failed. Edward VI died young. Mary I left no children. Elizabeth I remained the Virgin Queen. The dynasty seemed to end. Yet through Mary Boleyn's daughter, unacknowledged and unrecorded, Henry's blood may have continued, winding its way silently through centuries of marriages until it re-emerged in Diana. If true, the Tudor line did not die. It simply went underground, waiting to surface again in the veins of modern princes. The genealogical trail from Catherine Carey to Diana Spencer is not without gaps and uncertainties. Records from the 16th and 17th centuries are imperfect, and the claim that Catherine was Henry's daughter remains unproven. Yet the continuity of descent is undeniable. Catherine's children survived, their descendants married well, their blood mingled with that of noble families, and through them, the Spencers inherited a connection to Tudor England. Even if one rejects the claim of Henry VIII's paternity, the Spencers remain linked to the Boleyns, themselves central to Tudor history. Diana, therefore, is bound to that dynasty by heritage, whether through blood or through alliance. The weight of this inheritance is profound. It casts Diana not as an outsider brought into the monarchy by chance, but as the culmination of centuries of lineage preservation. Her marriage to Charles was not simply a fairy tale, it was, in a sense, the closing of a circle. The Tudors, who once seemed extinguished, had returned to the throne through her sons. William, now heir apparent, embodies the confluence of Windsor, Spencer, and perhaps Tudor blood. In him, the legacies of three dynasties meet. But what does this mean for history and for the monarchy itself? The answer lies in the symbolic power of bloodlines. Monarchies thrive on the mystique of ancestry, on the idea that rulers are bound by heritage to the past. For the British crown, Tudor blood is iconic. The dynasty that transformed England, birthed the Anglican Church, and ushered in the Elizabethan Golden Age. To suggest that this blood flows in the veins of William and Harry is to connect the modern monarchy to its most legendary past. It is to claim continuity where once there was rupture, to transform Diana into a bridge between eras. Yet there is also tragedy in this inheritance. The Boleyns, the Careys, and the Knollys lived in a world of peril, where proximity to power often led to ruin. Anne Boleyn lost her head, Lettice Knollys was banished, countless others endured scandal and exile. Diana, too, suffered for her place at the heart of monarchy. Her life echoed the patterns of her ancestors, adoration turned to betrayal, privilege shadowed by pain, survival ending in tragedy. The parallels are haunting, as if the blood itself carried with it not only privilege but fate. Part 4 has traced the path from Catherine Carey to the Spencers, illuminating the genealogical connections that underpin Diana's Tudor secret. We have seen how marriages carried forward the possibility of royal blood, how aristocratic families preserved their heritage, and how the Spencers became the ultimate custodians of this hidden lineage. Diana's ancestry, far from ordinary, is a tapestry woven from scandal, survival, and ambition, stretching back to the shadowed court of Henry VIII. Yet one final question remains. What is the meaning of this hidden inheritance today? In Part 5, we will reflect on the legacy of Diana's Tudor bloodline, its impact on William and Harry, its resonance for the monarchy, and its symbolic significance for history itself. We will consider how secrets of the past shape the present, and how the whisper of Tudor blood continues to echo in the halls of Windsor. For the story of Diana's bloodline is not only about genealogy, it is about destiny and about the shadows of history that never quite fade. The trail of genealogy leads us at last to Diana Frances Spencer, born in 1961 at Althorpe, heir not only to the grandeur of her family's estates, but to centuries of whispered secrets. Her lineage, traced through Mary Boleyn's daughter Catherine Carey and carried forward by the Knollys and their descendants, placed her in the long shadow of the Tudor dynasty. For generations that legacy had been obscured, buried beneath official records and polite silence. Yet in Diana it surfaced once more. She was presented to the world as an ordinary young woman, transformed into a fairy tale princess. But her blood carried echoes of a dynasty that had once shaped the very destiny of England. When Diana walked down the aisle in July 1981, her veil concealed more than a nervous smile. It hid centuries of forgotten history, a story that began in the dangerous court of Henry VIII and stretched across time into the modern age. The public saw a romantic marriage, the union of Windsor and Spencer, but the genealogical whisper suggested something greater, that through Diana the long-denied blood of the Tudors returned to the throne. Her life, however, revealed the darker side of this inheritance. just as Anne Boleyn was lifted to glory before being cast aside, just as Lettice Knollys was loved and then banished. Diana's story followed the same cruel pattern. Adored as the people's princess, she was also betrayed, isolated, and ultimately broken beneath the weight of monarchy. And yet, as Mary Boleyn triumphed by bearing children who endured, Diana's greatest triumph was her sons. William and Harry carry forward not only the Windsor inheritance, but also the hidden legacy of the Tudors. In William, heir to the throne, lies the possibility that the dynasty Henry VIII so desperately fought to preserve may live again, not through official proclamation, but through the silent persistence of blood. In Harry, though distanced from the crown, the same legacy flows, proving that history cares nothing for titles, but everything for lineage. Together they embody both continuity and rupture, privilege and rebellion, carrying within them a story far larger than themselves. This secret matters not because it can be proven beyond all doubt, but because of what it symbolizes. The Tudors ended with Elizabeth I, a dynasty extinguished for want of heirs. But perhaps they did not end at all. Perhaps their blood lived on, denied yet unbroken, hidden in the veins of descendants who married and survived through centuries until they produced Diana, a princess who captivated the world. Her fate echoed theirs, raised high, adored by millions, and destroyed by the very system that exalted her. In her life, we see the resilience of forgotten women, the endurance of bloodlines dismissed and denied, the tragic poetry of history repeating itself. Historians may argue, as they always have, over the evidence. Catherine Carey may or may not have been Henry VIII's daughter. The records are uncertain, the proof elusive. But history is not made only of facts. It is shaped by possibility, by imagination, by the power of stories carried through generations. Diana's Tudor secret belongs to that realm. It may never be confirmed, yet its allure is undeniable. It casts her not as an outsider chosen by chance, but as the culmination of a dynastic circle, the hidden heir of a past that never truly died. And so when we look at Diana, we see not just a modern princess, but the embodiment of half a millennium of ambition, betrayal, survival, and fate. In her face we glimpse the ghosts of Mary Boleyn, of Catherine Carey, of the Tudors themselves. In her children we see the continuation of that lineage, the promise that the blood once thought lost endures. William may one day reign not only as a Windsor, but as a Tudor reborn, closing a circle that began with Henry VIII's desperate hunger for heirs. Harry, too, carries the same legacy into a different life, proof that history flows beyond crowns and thrones. Diana's life was luminous and tragic, a modern echo of ancient stories. She was silenced, marginalized, pursued relentlessly by forces she could not escape. Yet like her ancestors, she survived long enough to ensure the future of her line. Her death was sudden and cruel, but her legacy is eternal, carried forward in the veins of her sons and remembered by millions who still speak her name with reverence. The dark Tudor secret hidden in Diana's bloodline may never be proven, but it continues to haunt our imagination. It reminds us that history does not vanish, it lingers, waiting for its moment to resurface. The Tudors are gone, but perhaps their blood remains, reborn in the most beloved princess of the modern age. And as long as William and Harry walk upon the world stage, the echo of that dynasty endures, whispering through the centuries that the past is never truly past. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.